Malcolm, good to have this conversation with you. So, last couple of days, you'd have noticed there's just so much focus on artificial intelligence, excitement about the opportunities it presents, worries about the risks that there may be. So, looking at that, and then this whole debate about what should be the nature of government regulation, will or it hinder innovation, what should be the nature of international collaboration. So, given all that, I wanted to start by drawing your attention to the internal regulatory framework or norms that Google had brought out in 2018 related to AI. What was the thinking behind that? Why did you feel it necessary? And what was the framework you had laid out there?
Ambassador, good to see you. Thanks for having this conversation with me, and to Carnegie for hosting this. It's been a tremendous week, and these sessions and the individual bilateral conversations have been very enriching and rewarding. So for Google, we've had AI for many, many years before this moment of generative AI. In fact, for people that have smartphones, which I know everyone in the room has a smartphone, I like to say that you have AI in your pocket. So, AI powers that, and you're using those every day. So whether it's your Gmail that will suggest a response to an email, or your map now will suggest the most eco-friendly route to get from point A to point B, those are driven by artificial intelligence, and they are continually innovating. In fact, the latest innovation with the eco-friendly route is to take into consideration not just the distance, but what the parking situation is like around your location. Because if you have to drive around the block 10 times, that's going to add to the cost from an eco perspective. So AI powers a lot of our applications, and it has for many, many, many years. In 2018, at our innovation conference, we call I/O, our CEO, Sundar, said that we were going to be an AI-first company, and it was going to inform all of our innovation and everything we did. And of course, we were very excited at that time for the opportunity that we saw AI could provide to improve people's lives, to make a lot of progress in some key and important areas that societies are grappling with. But we also understood that there were challenges with this technology. And so at the same time, we began an internal conversation to develop a point of view on how we would approach innovation in the artificial intelligence space. And what we wanted to do was create a North Star for our engineers, so that as they began to innovate and iterate on artificial intelligence products and services, we would have a common understanding of our value system. So we designed, after a lot of conversation, 11 principles in 2018. 7 of them are affirmative principles, things that we aspire to do, and 4 of them are things that we say we're not going to do, and they've served as this North Star. And I think it's worth just ticking them off because they're relevant to the conversation we're all having globally. The first one of the 7 affirmative ones are to be socially beneficial, to design products that are socially beneficial. That's first and foremost, number 1. Number 2 is to design products that are built and tested for safety. Number 3, to design products that avoid reinforcing unfair bias, or that have unfair bias in those products. 5, to design products that have privacy by design in those products. Next, to be accountable to these principles. 6, to be scientifically excellent, to have scientific excellence in the development of our products. And finally, to promote products that promote these principles. The 4 that we developed that were things that we've decided we're affirmatively not going to do. Design products, we weren't going to design products that violated international norms on human rights. We weren't going to design products that created surveillance tools that were in violation of norms around surveillance. Third, we weren't going to design weapons or products whose primary purpose was to injure people. And then finally, we weren't going to design products that, on balance, the harm outweighed the good from those products.
So in subsequent reviews, do you get a sense that internally the company lived up to those standards? And then, of course, also every year, annually, you've done a review of the process, how it has advanced, come up with new sort of norms. So if you could also walk us through how you've assessed the progress in subsequent years.
Yeah. So, having designed the principles, the next piece is how do we execute against those principles? So 3 things we had to do. One was we had to educate our engineers and our product teams on these principles. So meeting with them, explaining the principles, answering questions, ensuring they were internalizing the principles, because at the end of the day, we needed them to internalize those and manifest those as they were designing products. The second key issue was then creating an internal process, to your question, to be accountable to the principles, to ensure that we had a system to analyze new products and services against the principles that we were holding ourselves to. And then third, we had to create internal capacity to do this work. So we now have hundreds of people whose only job it is to analyze those principles against new technologies that we're developing. And then, as you say, we put out a report every year that walks through how new products and services in the artificial intelligence space, how we've analyzed those relative to those principles to be accountable. So what it's done is served us very well in this moment. That was 2018. For 4 years, we've done that work. And then as generative AI has come onto the scene and really exploded onto the scene, it gave us a muscle memory to be prepared for this moment. And so a manifestation of how that works is our generative AI product is barred. And I'm going to give you a very simple example because I'm a lawyer, not a technologist, so I can only understand the simple examples. But there's more complicated examples that demonstrate the application. The barred tool, we recognized, could have a tendency of creating confusion with some people about the nature of the service itself, and that it could be, people could confuse it as being a person-like entity. So we created mitigations to avoid that misperception, including, and this is sort of the simplistic, but it makes a big difference, where it won't use the pronoun I in its responses. So it's not going to say, I suggest that you think about a certain situation in this way, and it does help to reinforce and avoid people anthropomorphizing the technology. And so, that was a mitigation as we were launching the generative AI that the team highlighted and worked to create a practical way to apply our principles.
So this year, there have been 2 rounds of voluntary commitments undertaken by different parts of the US industry related to AI. You've been also involved in one of those processes. Has it been easy for US industry to come together and agree on a set of voluntary commitments, because there would also be competitive pressures? What was your experience of that process?
Well, I think there's certainly for companies like ourselves a tremendous feeling of competitive pressure to meet the moment and to provide the best and most useful AI products and services. But I think for Google at least, one of the key learnings from developing the principles and applying the principles to new technologies was we learned that you could be both innovative and responsible at the same time. There's certainly tension in some cases, but we became comfortable with leaning into the tension and trying to reconcile innovation with being responsible. And sometimes it's easier set of conversations, sometimes they're more difficult. So we felt comfortable that while there was this competitive dynamic, that we could still agree to principles that were good and that we had developed and that we could share with other companies and talk to the government about adopting, some version of those principles, and it would still allow for the competition that we have. And so I don't feel that there was actually in those initial conversations much of a hurdle in terms of getting to a place where we agreed we needed to have some principles to guide our
And there's
work.
this constant debate about what should be the voluntary steps taken by industry and what should be the government effort at regulation. And US government has come out now with what everybody's been referring to, a very expansive set of guidance for regulation related to AI. More than 100 pages, and of course, many more pages if you have a larger font size. But how are you assessing the US, what the US government has put out, and how do you see the industry government interface to play out in this context?
I think there were 114 pages with the font I was using when I printed out the executive order. I think the executive order, just to step back for a second, is more than just the prescriptive rules. It includes things like building capacity within the government to look at, for instance, privacy by design, research and development around new technologies that are safe. So I think those things are really encouraging. From a framework standpoint, it endorsed and embraced what the OECD had recommended a few years ago, which is to have a hub and spoke approach to regulation, which I think is the right thing to do. So at the end of the day, the hub and spoke approach is that there's some central expertise within the government on artificial intelligence technology, and that wouldn't have to be recreated at all of the different agencies in the government. And the inverse to that is there doesn't need to be a super regulator that replicates the work that all of the other agencies are tasked with doing. So if it's driverless cars, it's the Department of Transportation that's going to have the expertise about their goals in protecting people on the highways, but they don't have to recreate AI expertise that'll be held within the central government. So that hub and spoke approach, I think, is an efficient way for a government to achieve their mandate without creating too much confusion and chaos. Now we're in the point where all of the agencies are going to be engaging in their rulemaking, and so that will involve my guess is every sector of the economy will be affected in some way because every sector of the economy is using AI or is planning to use AI in some fashion.
Given the fast pace of development related to AI, various governments, organizations are rushing to develop frameworks related to AI. And also at the, not just at national level, but multilateral level, there are efforts. You have the GPay effort, you have the Bletchley conference that took place. There's also something happening in the framework of the United Nations, the G7. So how do you assess these processes playing out? And from the perspective of industry, is there a need for an interoperable set of legal frameworks? Is that necessary or need not hinder whatever innovation the industry is looking at?
You probably won't be surprised that I think it's absolutely essential that we have interoperable standards at a global level. And, it's fairly obvious that this is a transborder medium, and regulations around safety that are developed in one jurisdiction are going to affect the safety for people in another jurisdiction. In that sense, it's sort of like climate issues and sustainability issues. It's hard to do anything here in a vacuum that doesn't affect the rest of the world. So globally interoperable standards, I think, are really important. And I think it's appropriate to focus, at least as a foundation, on high-level principles. Get some basic agreement on both what we want to agree that these technologies should do and things that we should be careful of. So a lot of fora for this. I think the OECD principles were reinforced by the Hiroshima G7, and I think those need to be internationalized in either the UN or the OECD or multiple fora and discussed. I mean, they may also need to be iterated because this needs to be, I think, globally interoperable.
Mm-hmm. In all this debate that is happening, how do you see the China factor playing out? Because the governance framework in China is different. The kind of entities who are active or maybe in the lead in terms of AI very often state-owned entities, and don't have the same considerations as the private sector. So the debate related to China, and they have made a lot of progress in AI. They are part of some of the multilateral conversations and not part of others. So how do you see that challenge playing out for industry perspective?
The geopolitics of it is probably your area of expertise more than mine, Ambassador. But I think the UK Safety Summit, China participated in that. There was some controversy on whether they should. I think it's actually a good thing that they're brought into the conversation at the end of the day, because we are all this. What they're going to do is going to affect the rest of the world, and vice versa. It's not to say that that jurisdictions need to be able to support their sovereign interests and protect their users, and there's going to be a lot of state issues that that different jurisdictions will be concerned about. But there's no doubt China. If you look at the pace and quality of the artificial intelligence work that's happening in China, there's various ways to look at that. One of the ways is to look at the quality of peer-reviewed publications that they're putting out. I think the U.S. is number one, China's number two. They're right there. So they're going to have an impact. And so I think the conversation between governments is a good one to have.
One of the criticisms that is often put out is that by all this talk of norms, regulations, an attempt is also possible of regulatory capture by the bigger players in the system, Google, Microsoft, and others. Do you see that as a genuine challenge?
Well, first and foremost, particularly with the frontier models, these safety issues that I think that we sort of have leaned into, we've said governments need to be in charge of the trajectory of these. They need to be aware of the capabilities of highly capable frontier model large language platforms, and responsible for ensuring that there is some way to ensure safety. That's the government's job. We have a role to play to make sure that we're providing the kind of transparency and accountability to inform that. But it's the government that, at the end of the day, that's going to have to make that decision. But it's also not governments and industry is the binary piece here. This has to be NGOs, civil society, academics. Everyone is going to have a role to play. It's always a danger of some sort of capture when any entity is regulated. I think one of the benefits of having, what's going to be a multilateral governance system here with different kinds of ways of looking at different parts of the technology stack will be that there'll be a lot of redundancy and a lot of different parts of the ecosystem that will be tasked with looking at some of the safety issues and regulatory issues. So I think it'll be just a much bigger conversation than technology and governments, which is going to be a good thing at the end of the day.
Well, it's been suggested that the technology related to AI is not fully understood, and it is also moving very fast. And in any discussion and norms and regulations will always be doing a catch-up and not fully there. How do you see this tension being handled?
Well, another real learning that we had from the design of our principles was it's really important to have principles that are durable. So if we can agree on the principles and they can be durable and stand up to different tests of time and iterations of technology, that will have a more lasting stickiness than having to rethink principles or regulations, every year. So the way I think about manifesting that is, they should be high level, they should be objective oriented. And so an example is a principle, for instance, around ensuring that roads are safe, rather than a global conversation of how the car should be designed or a motorbike should be designed. We should have those goals, and then different jurisdictions and different organizations can look at the tactics depending on relative to the technology and how to get there. But I think if we have those sort of high-level principles, they'll be durable, and then putting in the work on the front end to get global consensus around that will be one that will last. Obviously, it will kick the tires on those. It's appropriate to do so. We should do so, but I think having those principles at a high level, which I think we're off to a good start, I think will give us a chance of greater success that they'll last.
It's also been suggested that rather than profit or revenue generation, technology should also be a force for global good. And therefore, the work that Google is doing in India, do you see potential there for Google partnering with India to take societal benefits from AI-related technology to other countries in Africa, Latin America, elsewhere, broadly now being described as the global South?
We have partnerships with the Indian government. We're really excited about this because one, India is going to be they're going to be a global leader on AI, and they're going to influence not just the global South, but they're going to influence the world, and rightly so. So some of the things that we are partnering with the government and testing out here in India are already being used in other parts of the world. So we have AI technology that has enabled us to do very, very good flood forecasting. So the standard technology had been about 2 days to be able to forecast a flood. The AI technology that we've developed moves that to about 10 to 12 days before the flood, which turns out to be a major difference in saving people's lives, that extra 8 days. We have a goal to have 100 different Indian languages interoperable with each other, instantaneously translatable, multimodal. We have 24 Indian languages right now. The training that our large language models are doing on that project are going to help us translate other global languages. So very excited about the work that we're doing here in India. We're going to build upon that work. We have a big commitment to this country, but it's going to benefit the rest of the world.
Well, I want to thank you, Malcolm, for your time. Clearly, it's a time of a lot of tension, a lot of opportunity, people struggling to keep up with the technology development. But good luck to you as you make the efforts to make technology work for larger societal benefit, not just in one country, but across the globe. So thank you.
Ambassador, thank you. Yeah.